President Biden's trip to Israel in June is in serious jeopardy as Prime Minister Naftali Bennett's government is on the verge of collapse. Daniel Cohen joining us now live from Tel Aviv with the political implications of a Biden visit to the Holy Land while Israel might be electing a new leader. Daniel?
Yeah. Hello, Emma. Hello, everyone, and happy Friday. Current opposition leader Benjamin Netanyahu waiting in the wings for an opportunity to return for a third stint as Israel's prime minister. An Israeli Knesset member from Bennett's fragile coalition defected yesterday, meaning Bennett no longer holds a majority. Benjamin Netanyahu's Likud party will reportedly call for a vote to dissolve Bennett's government and ask for a new election, the fifth in just over 3 years, when the Knesset meets on Wednesday. I met Netanyahu while traveling with an evangelical delegation discussing the Abraham Accords. This was just a few weeks ago. Now, the meeting was off the record, but I can tell you Netanyahu is rested, ready, and eager to reassume the prime ministership. U.S. presidents have traditionally stayed away from Israel when the country is in an election period. Mr. Biden had planned to make his first trip since becoming president in June. Just the talk of his visit has already stirred controversy. You may remember because of enormous negative pushback, Mr. Biden was forced to backtrack on plans to open a Palestinian consulate in Jerusalem, the heart of the Jewish state. Plans to visit East Jerusalem next month would be seen as a rollback of President Trump's acknowledgement of Jerusalem as Israel's capital and undermine Israeli sovereignty. Meantime, President Biden left the U.S. for Asia after hailing the applications of Sweden and Finland to NATO in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine and opposition from Turkey.
New members joining NATO is not a threat to any nation. It never has been. NATO's purpose is to defend against aggression. That's its purpose, to defend.
President Biden will join other world leaders at the G7 next month in Europe as the war in Ukraine drags on. Now, President Biden may still travel to Israel, but with runaway inflation, record high gas prices, a baby formula shortage, soaring crime, and a porous border, Emma, not going to Israel may help him avoid another divisive lightning rod that could send his record low approval ratings even lower. Emma.
Plenty of domestic challenges he's facing here. Daniel Cohen with the latest. Daniel, Thank you. In the meantime, as we know, President Biden is overseas in Asia. He's in South Korea right now before he will head to Japan. Now, it comes as China is launching South China Sea drills, and there are concerns over North Korea possibly conducting missile tests. Joining us now with analysis is foreign policy expert Harley Lipman, live in studio. Harley, great to see you. Thanks so much for coming on today. All right, what are your expectations for the president's trip to Asia?
I think that what's happening in Ukraine should be a potent lesson for China, in that the West rallies, and in a sense, the irony of what Russia did in Ukraine gave the United States a strategic gift, because NATO was somewhat demoralized and declining. But NATO got invigorated by Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and it got strengthened by the admission of Sweden and Finland as being new NATO members. And Finland is a very potent country militarily and in cybersecurity. So I think China now sees that the West may not be as weak as they think. And I think that that's going to serve us well, because we want to deter China from invading Taiwan.
Right. Notably, the president will not be visiting Taiwan during his trip overseas. Did that stand out to you? Was that a missed opportunity?
Probably. I think it would have been a good message for him to have gone to Taiwan, as he's had members of his staff visit Ukraine. But that said, I think one of the big differences is that Putin really is a one-man show, and you could see why that has been a problem. There's no one to brainstorm with him, where China is run by committee. And also the Chinese military is probably going to be far more competent than the Russian, which has been plagued by corruption and morale issues and poor training. So China is going to be a much more lethal threat vis-a-vis Taiwan than Russia is even to Ukraine.
Sure, and Ukraine has seen the support of NATO allies. As we know,
Yes.
Ukraine is not a NATO member, but they are receiving funds billions dollars worth of funds from the United States and then other allied nations here. You mentioned, of course, the threat of possibly China on Taiwan. Wall Street Journal also taking note of that. I'd like to share part of this article here. It reads, China is insisting its elites pull out of its overseas assets, eyeing Western sanctions on Russia. They saw what happened to Russia. Is this a prelude of them wanting to take over Taiwan? Essentially, just looking about how everything has played out so far in this war.
Yeah, the bad news is that China has watched what has happened and they're learning from it. Mm-hmm. They're very good at copying and listening, and they're preparing. But of course, an invasion of Taiwan would be strategically much more and logistically much more difficult than what Russia did in Ukraine, because it's an amphibious invasion. And those are very difficult things to carry out. And it would also mean it would be very difficult for the West, the United States, to resupply Taiwan, because China has the largest navy in the world right now. So it's really important that we build up our military so we could counter their threat.
When it comes to those sanctions as well, or tariffs, could the U.S. sort of proactively put those in place to really ensure that China would not take action on Taiwan before it's too late?
That is one approach, but of course that can make China really angry, saying we didn't do anything yet and we're being punished. So I'm not sure that's the wisest approach. But I think China being told in no uncertain terms that the West and the United States will not tolerate the invasion of a sovereign nation, Taiwan. And I think if the United States is firm, that will bring out peace. Nobody wants war. We don't want war. But you're going to get peace through strength. When countries see that we're weak or we're not standing up and supporting our friends and allies, they're going to take advantage of it. And that's just the reality of the world. So for people who want peace, we have to have a strong military and a very strong deterrent to China and Russia in the future. And that'll preserve peace more than anything else.
You mentioned talks of peace and possibly an end to the war. Have you seen steps being taken to end the Russian war in Ukraine at this point? We've seen, again, additional funds for military equipment go over, but haven't heard really an update on peace talks.
Well, I think you're going to get peace when Russia loses, because the history of warfare shows that when you have dictatorships that are embarking on military expansion, they stop when they're forced to stop. They don't stop just when they want to. So there are a lot of people who say, oh, Russia just wants Ukraine and that's it. Why are we making a big deal about this? It's their sphere of influence. I would respectfully disagree and say if they got Ukraine, Putin would be playing out the playbook of Hitler. They would start there and they would continue. So the message is appeasement doesn't work. And it's been quite extraordinary, the reaction of the Europeans. They've been galvanized. You know, Europe has been largely an appeasement-oriented society, if you will. As a continent, they have always practiced that, and that led up to World War II. But I think people have learned lessons, and the reaction is remarkable. And I think we've got enormous unity right now, and we have to preserve that. Yeah. So if we keep that unity, again, we have the best chance of peace talks and ending the war.
And likely the war will be discussed as the president makes his trip overseas. I'd like to talk to you about something that will be happening here stateside, and that is the Israeli Day Parade. It's set for this Sunday in New York City. It's been a few years since it happened. Of course, we went through COVID, so that kind of put a delay on things. But tell me what we can expect this year, also the significance of the location and who might be attending.
Well, what's great about this parade is the unity of the Jewish people in uniting to support Israel. Whether you're on the left or the right, everybody's coming together to support Israel's independence, Israel's right to exist as a Jewish nation. And that's very, very powerful. In all groups, you have different points of view. So unity is a huge theme. I think the second consequence is this is a celebration of the Abraham Accords, which was where 4 Arab Muslim nations made peace with Israel, and it's a warm peace. Israel has peace now with Jordan and Egypt, but it's a cold peace. And while Israel celebrates that, warm peace is going to lead to other peace agreements, we believe. And that's just going to promote stability in the region and a better outcome for everyone.
Yeah, and I'm so lucky to be sitting next to the Grand Marshal of this year's parade with a little preview of what we can expect. Harley Littman, thank you so much for coming on today and
Thank you
talking
for
about
having me,
Looking
Emma.
forward to it. We appreciate it.